Today I want to talk about the very nature of self-revelation, annihilation of self, and this dynamic within interpersonal relationships between males and females in establishing polarity. Again, as I discussed earlier, the masculine, the pater, the pattern is always seeking truth. Ideally, in its healthy form, should be seeking truth, seeking God, seeking to be of service to a higher calling above oneself. And again, I'm not going to say this is always the case, but it is generally the case that the feminine is more interested and invested in her own inner world and in how she feels about things and not about how things actually are. The feminine deals in temporary truths and not in higher overarching ideals, generally. And again, how do we see this within nature? Again, the sun, with its, for the most part, consistent output for us and other planets and other bodies to provide that constant output, produce, protect, provide, whereas the earth is, the earth is not performing a higher calling beyond her own direct experience, right? What is on and in the earth she is concerned with, but she has no influence and no output generated towards other celestial bodies. And again, how does this relate back to the masculine and the feminine and the Ouroboros and the self-revelation, annihilation of self? I'll get into that. So, any guy who's been a player at any point in time with females knows they like to employ shit tests. And these shit tests are various experiences meant to test the man in his masculinity. And some of these are really classic, and any gentleman watching has probably experienced some of these. They include pulling away, they include going silent, they include, ghosting before a date or going really quiet. They asking about, other women you've been with. A lot of loaded questions and a lot of indirect attempts to gather information about you as the man and how you're going to handle things. And the reason for the shit tests to begin with is because the female, the feminine, is seeking reassurance from the masculine. The masculine is not only able to withstand, her weather, her cycles, her volatility, but furthermore to assess whether it could, because if you can't deal with her bullshit, you most certainly can't deal with the bullshit of the world, and the external stressors. If a woman is able to crush you, then let's see what a saber-toothed tiger does. So it's from an evolutionary standpoint. I'm not demonizing it, but I want to shine light on what it is, so other people are better able to interact with these things and not go through the headaches. And again, so all these different little petty tests and, subversive, or one could say borderline manipulative tactics are meant to ferret out and disqualify men as being suitable partners. Because again, the woman does not truly love the man in the way that the man loves the woman. She is incapable of this. But that's a whole nother topic for another day. Anyways, so in facing the bullshit, the deception, the lies, I'll be very direct here in that, the lies and antics of the feminine, the masculine is forced, again, by that friction experience that can whittle him down. We can see many cases of men who become emasculated over the course of weeks, months, or years in a relationship. And again, you can also see this in how people often look like their dogs, or their dogs look like them, or how when people stay together for a very long period of time, how they start to, amalgate and share different traits of the other person. Another topic, but genes hopping between species, not even in the same genus or family, is very interesting. Looking at prey and predator complexes. And then that also ties into vaccines and other such things, but I digress. So in this process of going through a woman's yin, shadow, lies, bullshit, emotional volatility, drama, it can either break a man down to her level, or it can further act as the separating polarity between the two. Right? When you, as a man, I'm talking to a man right now, step into a room and there's people engaging in undisciplined behavior or degenerate behavior, ultimately at the end of the day, you have two choices. You can choose to resonate with the frequency of the rest of the group, go along to get along, or you can stand apart from the crowd. Anyone who's experienced bullying or social dynamics knows that there's, pros and cons to each thing. But again, going back to this standing in truth and of polarizing oneself against the crowd, I would urge people to not go along to get along, to speak truth even when it's unpopular, to be firm in strength and righteousness even when all the lies are being sold as truths. And this also, Nietzsche said all true men love danger and play, and thus woman is the, ideal subject. And it's very apparent to me again how the very nature of the yin-yang, masculine, feminine dynamic does act as a very strong catalyst for growth. Because a woman will expose and ferret out and test you on all your weak points as a man. If you're not getting the bag to a certain capacity, she might push you on that. If you're not following your purpose, she might push you on that. If you're not being the best version of yourself, she might push you on that. And again, if your partner truly loves you, and this goes back for the male or female, you want what's best for them. Which again, this is ultimately what the feminine is seeking through the shit tests. In testing a man on his masculinity and his ability to stand in truth and not lower himself down to her bullshit, she's able to see if she has, again, someone that can be daddy. Because the only two men who actually discipline a woman and guide her and teach her are her father and her husband / mate, potentially. So the process, isn't going to go away. The shit tests aren't going to go away, gentlemen, for women. It's natural process. My biological father is 80 years old, and I witnessed myself growing up when he was in his 50s and his 60s of how he still had to go through shit tests with mi sangre madre. It doesn't stop. This comes back to, again, the grass is always greener type thing, where people who are alone become enamored with the idea of being in a relationship because of the contrast, and then when you're in one, now you see the grass is greener on the other side. But it's just important to be aware of the game that's being played before one entertains it. And again, the women who are doing these shit tests are ultimately seeking truth. They're prodding the man in these different shit tests in these different capacities because they need direction. They need to be led. Again, this is very biblical as well. They need someone who's willing to tell them, don't put that in your mouth. Don't do this activity. Again, and sometimes it's not even just telling. In today's society, men have been more emasculated as ever from a societal level as well as hormonal. But, even if it's not directly telling a woman, like, I don't accept this behavior, of walking away or, silence. As a man, we need to be disqualifying women ruthlessly for their actions, because part of the reason why we have this simp culture and why we have such hypergamous females is because there's no lack of validation and of attention given to them, no matter how degenerate, deceptive, or dark their behavior. And again, we can see this within OnlyFans, within pornography, within social media, celebrities, of where men see this thing of beauty, and instead of seeking to guide it and nourish it, they condone the very things that they condone or are compliant with the very things that will destroy it, right? And this is very apparent in the hot, crazy matrix of women, right? Because also, too, the more attractive a woman, the more options she knows she has. And so the level of shenanigans with which they will pull to filter out males, disqualify them, are also more intense. So if males want to change the power dynamic and reestablish themselves as the prize, they need to increase their boundaries and thresholds for what they will tolerate. Because again, your character and the respect you gather from other people isn't what you tell them. It's what you tolerate and what you accept. If a lot of conversations happen in person, they wouldn't ever evolve into these bigger patterns, because people just need to get punched in the mouth sometimes, but I digress there too as well. With online presence being such a huge thing as nowadays, silence and extricating oneself can often be the most effective tool. But again, I just want to reiterate this. The feminine's contrast appearing in the masculine's life is meant to test and prod, so that way he can stand further and stronger in his masculinity. Everyone wants to be gangster till it's time to do gangster ass shit. If you want to be a strong man, you're going to have to withstand a lot of feminine storms in nature. And there's no sense trying to project the masculine mind onto the feminine body, because they operate through completely different operating systems. Right? Speaking of Mother Nature, it's starting to rain.